Hi everyone, and welcome to your first video for Algebra 1. I know we talked about this in class, but really the idea here is that you're kind of listening to, watching the video, and taking notes along with me in your packet as I go through the notes. Now obviously since this is a video, you can pause as much as you need, you can re-watch it, which I would definitely encourage you to do. As we're going through, if you have a question about anything, just make a note maybe on the side here so you remember to ask about that in class, because I definitely want to take some time when we start class to go over any questions that you might have had. So the purpose of today's video is just to get down some basic vocabulary about mathematical expressions, because that's what we're going to be talking a lot about, over the next few weeks. So let's get some basic terminology down. And a lot of these things will be familiar to you. We just want to make sure we all have a common understanding. So the first term we have is an expression. And an expression is just a mathematical statement that does not have an equal sign. So for example, a basic numeric expression. And numeric means just numbers, right? So a basic expression with numbers would be something like 4 plus 2. So it's a math statement, but we don't have any equal signs. Now, terms. Terms are the parts of an expression that are separated by addition and subtraction signs. Right? So again, if I looked at my numeric expression 4 plus 2, my terms, my parts, would be a positive 4 and a positive 2. We would say that expression has two terms. Our next word is variable, and I know you guys are all familiar with this. This has come up a little bit already in class. So a variable is just a letter that can be used to represent any number. Right? A lot of times we'll use the letter X, but we could use any number, any letter to represent that number. Okay, next is a coefficient. So a coefficient is a number that is multiplied by a variable. I also like to think of it as a number that's kind of attached to a variable. So for example, I might see something like 3x. We know that the x is our variable. That's our letter that's used to represent some number. The number right in front of that is our coefficient. And the last term we need for today is a constant. A constant is a number that does not have a variable. And a lot of times I just think of this as a number that is by itself. So for example, the number 5 would be a constant. Any number that's just by itself, it's not attached to a variable. So let's go back up here really quick and kind of review. Here, if I look at this whole thing, this is called an expression, and we actually call that a variable expression. Right? A variable because it contains the variable x, and an expression because there is no equal sign. Okay, this expression has two terms, so I'm going to kind of circle this, and I'm going to circle this. Notice that when I take the 4, I'm taking the plus sign in front of it as well. So this, we would say, has two terms, two parts. Okay. Obviously, we know the x is our variable. Let's see, our next word was coefficient. We said the coefficient was the number that's attached to the variable. So I'm going to circle the 3 and make a note that that is the coefficient. And then the last thing we had talked about was a constant, which is that number by itself. So my positive 4 here is a constant. And again, this is vocab that's going to come up over and over again. So if there are terms that are new to you, you'll be seeing them and getting lots of practice, so you'll become familiar with them very quickly. So let's see what we're going to do with this vocabulary if we flip to the next page. So the first thing we need to do is just to be able to look at a variable expression and pick out these various pieces. So first is the terms. Remember, we said the terms are separated by a plus and minus. So what I typically do is if I'm going through an expression, every time I see a plus or a minus sign, I kind of draw a little line right before it just to break this into parts. So now before this plus sign, I'm going to draw a line. Before this next minus, I'll draw a line. And then again, before that plus, I'm going to draw a line. Again, that just helps me break it into parts. So now I can see that I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 parts. So my terms are a 3x. When I grab the 4y, I take that negative that's in front. So my next term is a negative 4y. I have a positive 2, a negative 7z, and a positive 8. Those are my terms. Next part I'm looking for are my variables. So I'm looking for any letters. So I notice I have an x in my expression. I have a y. And I have a z. Now the coefficients, I know my coefficients are going to be attached to those variables. So to find the coefficients, I'm going to look for my variable x, and I find that has a positive 3 attached to it. For my next variable y, I'm going to look what's attached is a negative 4. We have to be careful to take those signs with us. And then attached to the z, I have a negative 7. So I can circle those in blue as well so we can see those with their signs. And then last, what we have, or what we're looking for, is our constants. That's kind of what's left over. It's the numbers that are by themselves. So I see I have a positive 2 and a positive 8. Okay, so that's just being able to pick out the parts of that expression. The last thing we're going to do here is talk about evaluating expressions. And this is a little crooked, so I'm going to try and fix that. Now, when we evaluate an expression, we substitute, or another good word for that is replace. We substitute a number for the variable, and then we simplify the expression. So for my first problem, it's asking me to evaluate 3x plus 4 when x equals 2. So they're telling me what x is equal to. So I know that this x is going to replace that x in my expression. So here's what it looks like. I'm going to copy the original expression, but I'm going to save a place for that x. Now, I know when two numbers are pushed together like this, it's multiplication. So that's why I'm using the parentheses here to show that I'm multiplying. So now that 2 is going to get substituted for the x. And now I can go ahead and use the order of operations to simplify. Remember that was parentheses, exponents, multiplication or division, whichever one comes first, and then addition or subtraction, whichever comes first. So if I look in my problem, I don't have parentheses or exponents, but what I see is that I have multiplication and addition. So looking at my order of operations, I know the multiplication comes first, 3 times 2 is 6 plus 4, and I know 6 plus 4 is 10. All right, what I would like you to do, let's see, we'll do one more together actually. We'll do these examples together, and then I'll give you some practice to start class. So let's look at number 1. Same thing, we're evaluating the expression for the given value of the variable. So they're telling us the value of that variable. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to copy my expression, negative 5 minus 2, but I'm going to put a placeholder for the x. Now, since they're telling me x is negative 3, I know that's what's going to go into my placeholder. Now here again, when we go to simplify, so far we've done step 1, which is substitute. Now I have to simplify, and I have to remember that order of operations. I have what looks like subtraction here, but I know this is actually, this negative 2 times negative 3 is multiplication. So if I do negative 2 times negative 3, I get a positive 6. If I bring down my negative 5, I have negative 5 plus 6, which will give me 1. Okay, last problem then. Again, we're going to copy our expression to start. So 4 plus, I'm going to leave a placeholder for my x, and I can't forget to bring down the squared. So the only thing I left a placeholder for was the x, and I brought down my squared. Now, I know that negative 5 is going to get plugged in for x, so I substitute that here. Now, if I look at my order of operations, I have exponents in this problem, so I need to do this first. Now, we have to be careful when we plug this into our calculator. We need to make sure we put those parentheses into our calculator. So negative 5 squared is going to give me a positive 25. I'm going to bring down my 4, and 25 plus 4 gives me 29. So that's the basics of working with expressions, and that'll help us with part 2 of the hundreds chart activity tomorrow. So thank you. I hope you took good detailed notes. If there's anything you need to go back and watch, I would highly recommend that you do so, and I'll see you in class tomorrow.